Today we're going to be making Belizean Relleno. You're watching the Bear Pantry Show. This is the first thing that we want to do when making the Relleno. I put some eggs to boil, and I only did 5 because it's only Joe and me and Jada that's going to eat this. I have about 1 pound of ground beef in this pan right here, and the pan is non-stick, and I didn't put any oil. And I'm using, you guys know I always use like my potato masher to get the ground beef to be apart, right? Because I don't want it into too many big clumps, kind of like when we did the meat pies. So basically this is all I'm going to do is brown the ground beef. And my eggs are almost done boiling. I'm going to put those in some cold water and peel them when it's all cooled down, because we're going to get those diced in time to add to this ground beef as another step to this meal, okay? So let me go ahead and get this all brown and kind of apart, and I'll show you what else we're going to add to this meat. Now this part right here with the chicken, we could have had, already done before we started doing the ground beef and all that stuff, all right? This is just half of a lemon that I'm using to squeeze on top of the chicken, because as you may know from watching all of my videos that we as Belizeans tend to clean our meats that way, right? And this is the inside part of the chicken. Sometimes I cook this when I'm doing stewed chicken. I don't really like it. Joe does. This is the kidney, the liver, and the heart's in there somewhere. I'm not, oh, so here's the heart. I'm not going to be using these parts in the chicken today, all right? So we want to go in here in these back parts, and this is actually very clean. And I didn't clean it before, but sometimes you just kind of luck out when you get the chicken from the store. My ground beef is cooking in the back, by the way, if you hear something frying. I get my hand here under the skin because I want to put some spices there. And so basically this is just washing the chicken, all right? And then I'm going to move this over to the counter to get this all seasoned with the spices that we're going to need. So let me go ahead and wash my hands. And then let's move this over to the counter to get it all seasoned. Okay, so my ground beef is over there, and it's ready for me to add the other stuff. The eggs are done. But I want to move over to the chicken first, like I told you, to show you what we're going to do to season up this chicken. Real simple, okay? I'm going to go ahead and turn my ground beef on low just because I don't want it to burn while I'm doing this. But that's why I tell you, you can go ahead and prepare this beforehand. So I'm putting some of the recado that we rub onto the meat. And I only use my powder recado for stuff like adding into ground beef or soups or stuff like that, okay? Because sometimes mom doesn't have it at the store, so when I buy it, I kind of pinch it. So this is all I'm doing, is put in some of the recado. And then I'm gonna put some salt. Let's be opening the cabinet. Put some salt on. Ooh, that's a lot, so we might not have to put too much on the front part. And some black pepper. And of course, you guys know that you can, see I get up under the skin and put it there. You can always put other spices, all right? But I keep things simple because, like I said, my palate's pretty simple, and I don't like to taste a lot of things on my food. I don't like to taste thyme and sage and rosemary, and I don't know, I don't like those things, but that's just me. And I'm putting some of the spice on the inside. Pretty much the chicken is ready. So let's move back over to, put that back. Let's move back over to our ground beef. So I've already soaked the egg in some cold water so that can be easy to peel. And I'm going to turn my ground beef back up to like medium because I turned it down so that it wouldn't burn while I was doing the chicken. And all I'm going to add to this is some onions and some cilantro. You can always go ahead and add maybe some dice of jalapeno peppers or some of those yellow hot peppers that I like to cook with, but I'm not doing it in my dish because the black recado is spicy and hot that we're going to make the soup out of, okay? And when you guys check in my book, I spelled the Relleno like R-I-E-N-O because I pretty much spelled it the way I heard it, and I didn't realize it had a Spanish spelling to it, so I think some of you may know it as R-E-L-L-E-N-O, Relleno, but it's still the same thing, all right? And it's different from chimole, or as my Utah family knows it, black soup. It's different from that in the regards that we're gonna stuff this ground beef with the diced up egg inside of the whole chicken and cook it whole as a soup. We're not going to cut the chicken into parts. Now, I don't make this dinner a whole lot because, not because of how it tastes or anything, but because it's kind of difficult to serve. But, you know, Belizean people make this, and, you know, I try to show a lot of my heritage here at the Bear Pantry show, so that's why I'm making this dish. But it's going to be kind of a waste for us here because the boys don't really like this soup. And basically it's just going to be Jada and me and Joe that's going to eat it. And turn it back up to high, all right? And we're going to add a little bit of water as we go along. And, you know, pretty much this soup is going to last us quite a few days unless I find somebody to share it with. But I wanted to do it for you guys. That's why I picked like one of the smallest chickens. I waited for a day when I could get a small chicken. And I think we're only going to add this water a couple of times to just make sure that the ground beef is thoroughly cooked. So you want to cook this at least 40 minutes for this ground beef, all right, to be thoroughly cooked. And you don't want it to be left with all this water when you're done, but you don't want it to be too dry either. So I'll show you at the end how it's supposed to look. But in the meanwhile, as it's cooking, we just add a little bit of water to it to make sure it doesn't stick or burn. And pretty much the chicken is ready. So all I have to do now is find a big pot that we're going to cook this in and go ahead and peel and dice up my eggs so that it's ready for this ground beef so that we can put it all in the chicken when all is said and done. Okay, so see you guys in a few minutes when this is done cooking and we're ready to move on to the next phase of making the relleno. So here we are 40 minutes later, and see, it's not too much gravy in this, right? And it's not too dry either. And I did add just like a sprinkle of salt and a sprinkle of black pepper. We don't want to add too much to make this dinner too salty because the chicken already has salt on it. We're going to add salt to the soup also. So this is done. Let me turn the stove off. And then let me show you guys that I've already peeled and diced my eggs. See right here? And pretty much it was easy to do because I shocked it with that cold water first. Sometimes I have such trouble with the egg. So what we're going to do now is move everything over to the counter so you guys can see what I have to do next with these parts to see how it goes together with the chicken. My ground beef is still very hot because I just took it off of the stove, so you may kind of want to wait for this to cool down when you're doing it so you don't get burned. But I'm in a rush because I came home a little bit early from work today and I decided to make this dinner, and then I realized I haven't shown it to you guys yet. So of course, what am I going to do but make a show on it, right? So we just pretty much want to work the egg in. Doesn't it look beautiful? Beautiful, has a nice color, right? We kind of want to work the egg into this. And then what we're going to do next is get our chicken. Remember our little chicken that we kind of seasoned a little bit earlier? We're going to peel it open like this, and we're going to spoon this right into the chicken. Now, I haven't checked the book to see what all instructions I put when I put this recipe in it, but I don't think I told you guys to sew it shut or anything. We're definitely stuffing it in there just like you would do bread stuffing. This is a carnivore's dream, right? For anybody who's on Atkins or stuff. Awesome, just meat in this dish. And we have a lot of that ground beef. So we're just going to go ahead and put as much as can fit in this chicken. And I'll show you the leftovers that we have so that you can know if you have a small chicken like this, maybe you can do a little bit less of the ground beef. See, I have this much left over. So that's not going to go to waste though, because we can always eat that with a little bit of tortilla at some other point. But, ooh, that kind of hurt my ear just now. So here, this is all in here, and it's kind of loose, and it's water. We want to pack it in. Maybe we could get some more in. I'll see if we can get some more in, okay? And now what we're going to do next, we're going to have to brown this chicken on both sides in a big pot. So you know what I'm thinking? I'm flying by the seat of my pants right here. I'm going to find a needle and thread or something and kind of sew this shut so that we don't lose our meat inside of this, okay? Okay, so here we are. I'm going to be conducting surgery, y'all. Just call me doctor, okay? So this is the parson nose. And my grandmother used to tell, that's the parson nose. It's a fancy name for saying the butt. So we want to tuck the butt in and start from here when we're sewing, because we want the butt to be like a stopper, okay? Doesn't that sound gross? So, and I got the biggest, fattest needle jade I had. And I'm using some black thread so that we can find it when it's time to take out our sutures. So let's go again here. And like I said, I'm not sure if I put this part in my book, but you know, you find things out as you go sometimes. And like I said, I don't make this recipe a whole lot because of the fact that it's kind of hard and messy to serve. But a lot of you have been asking me to do this. It's always easier to just do the chimole or black soup. Spicy and hot the same way, same type of ingredients, just a different style of presenting it, right? So you see what I'm doing, right, guys? Just sewing. And by the way, this feels good. I'm kind of sick, you know. I can look at a lot of medical things and not get all grossed out. So I'm just using the skin and sewing it shut. I remember my Aunt Tylene used to do this with the turkey all the time for Christmas. They would put all the stuffings. What I do now is just jam aluminum foil in the back end to hold everything in. So this is almost done. And it's just to protect the meat that's inside. We don't want it to fall out of the chicken. It probably, some of it will probably still fall out. But we want to keep as much of it in there as we can, okay? So I will meet you guys back at the stove because this is almost done. So we could get our pot ready. If you notice, this has a lot of stages, right? This one. But isn't it still simple? That's, you know, that's my motto here at the Bear Pantry Show. Keep it simple. All I'm going to do is add a little bit of oil to this pot. Not too much, about a tablespoon or two. And it's a non-stick pot too, so that's why I can get away with adding very little oil. Then I'm going to get our chicken, take it over to the stove, where I'm going to go ahead and put it in the pot whole. We'll go ahead and put the neck too, all right? And we're going to let that just brown for a few minutes on that side, and we're going to flip it to the other side. Then I'm going to show you guys what to do next. So you're going to need some tongs to go ahead and flip it. And that's why it's also good to have a non-stick pot, okay? You don't want this to be sticking to the pot. You get some other mitts. This chicken's not going to master me. I'm the boss. Doesn't it look golden brown and beautiful? So we're going to let it cook on that side. And that only took about not even 3 minutes to cook on the first side. And you don't want to go ahead and broil that first before you put it in, because you're going to lose all the beautiful gravy and juices that it has. So you want to go ahead and just brown it like this, okay? Okay, so it took about 3 minutes for that side to cook, and all I did was fill this cup of water in there to kind of quiet the pot down. But what I'm going to do now is get more water and just fill it to cover the chicken. When I was writing the recipe book, I kind of had to like try to figure out how much water to tell you guys to add, and I would say so many cups or so many liters, but it's actually just to cover the chicken to make a soup so everybody can have some of it to eat, all right? So let me go get some more water. Okay, so I have a little bit of the chicken showing here, but see, we're almost to the top of this pot with our fluid, and I don't want it to boil over once this chicken start cooking. Now remember, the chicken was raw when we started. Yes, we used 6 minutes to brown both sides, 3 minutes and 3 minutes, but we still need 1 hour to cook this chicken to make sure it's cooked all the way through. When we get closer to that hour, that's when we're going to add our black recado, and I'm going to show you what we do just like we did with the chimole. I'm going to show you how we mix that down into a paste and put that through a strainer, and we're also going to add some diced tomatoes. And I don't use tomatoes from the can because I like it fresh. So I'm going to go dice some tomatoes and get the black recado ready. And this is going to cook for about an hour, and I'm going to put it on high. Here's our black recado. It looks rich, doesn't it? And you guys remember what I do. Put a little bit of water. And of course, you know, if you have nicely manicured nails, that's going to be not nicely manicured when you're done, because this kind of stains for a little while, just like the red recado. But all is fair when you're cooking, right? And I don't want to put too much of the water, but I could put a little bit more. And I'm going to leave the ricotta out because we might need another piece after we add it to the pot. We're going to check and see how dark it looks and how it tastes. But this is all I'm doing just to mix it. This is kind of like clay, right? And we're just kind of diluting it down into like water, like a liquid. And in the meanwhile, when I'm done with this, I'm going to dice up those tomatoes. And then I'll be back in about 50 minutes or so to add all these things to our beautiful pot of soup. This is about 30 minutes into it, and I just wanted you guys to see how beautiful it looks while it's cooking. I think that's what I enjoy the most too about cooking, is not just even tasting the food when it's done. It's actually just watching all the things come together. And I've decided to, with this leftover ground beef and egg right there, that we're going to go ahead and add that to each person's bowl when we serve this soup, okay? And right there you see I have the black recado ready. And there's our soup. So I didn't add anything else to the pot, no salt, no pepper. We're going to add the black recado right towards the end, and we're going to add the tomatoes right towards the end too. And we're going to see, we're going to flip the chicken over at some point also, but for right now it's beautiful the way it looks. So take a look, guys. I flipped our little birdie over. Here's our sutures right there. And I have my black recado. This is about, I'd say 40 minutes into the cooking of our soup. I'm going to pour that in there. I'm going to get something and stir it up so we can see if that's dark enough. And I go by the color of how the soup look when I'm making it. I like it real dark. But you can also go by the taste. You don't have to just go by the color. So let's get our spoon, see? It's kind of dark, right? Beautiful. I may end up putting a little bit more in there, but let's allow it to cook some more. Looks pretty, huh? Different than the chimole for sure. You know what I'm going to do too? Since I already put my recado in, I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit more water to the pot, but not too much, just a little bit more. So I added this whole cup of water, and let's check our darkness of our soup. Yeah, that's still pretty good. You know, at this point too, guys, you could add some diced onions in here if you wanted to. And definitely the diced tomatoes is like 5 minutes before you shut the pot off. That's when you want to add the diced tomatoes. But if you wanted to add onions to the soup itself, you could go ahead and add some of that now. I'm choosing not to add any because once we put the ground beef and the egg and stuff floating around, that has the onions that I had put earlier. But you could definitely put more, see? The pot's back up to speed again after adding that water. And the only reason I added the water is because we want everybody to be able to have some soup when you serve this, all right? So at first I added half a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of black pepper and tasted it. And it wasn't salty enough. The black pepper was fine. So I went ahead and added another half a teaspoon of salt. So it's 1 teaspoon of salt, half a teaspoon of black pepper. We're right near the end. As you guys can see how the meat is kind of separating from the bone. And this is the way you want this, really, really soft. And the way the person who taught me how to make this, the way they said that we're supposed to serve this like a soup, we're supposed to, of course, break the sutures out of our chicken here. And this chicken is supposed to be so soft that you're supposed to use a spot spoon like this and just kind of dig into the flesh, dig some of the stuff from the middle, serve it and make a bowl. But I'm not going to serve it like that because like I told you guys before, the reason I don't make this way, the relleno instead of the chimole too much, is because of the fact that it's kind of hard to serve. So I'm just putting a little bit of tomato. You can always add the tomato. Like next day if you have leftovers, you can always add fresh tomato again if you want more. That's only like 1 small tomato. I'm not going to add too much more. And remember we have our leftover ground beef and egg. And I was going to like put a little bit in everybody's bowl, but we could actually go ahead and add that in there. It's not going to hurt. So let's go add it in there. It doesn't really need to cook. It's just going to really be getting warm while the pot cooks. And see how it looks? Gorgeous, right? Ha ha ha. Look how beautiful. So, gonna allow this to cook another 5 minutes and then shut it off, allow it to cool, and when I come back I'm gonna show you how I serve the relleno. You know, of course, I do everything differently, right? So here we go. In a little while I'll be serving. I took my thread out, or my sutures, using fancy words. And let's take a look. See, I put it in a baking pan. Look at that beautiful inside. Isn't that gorgeous right there? See the ground beef? that's coming out right there. And the chicken is cooked all the way through. It's not pink right here in the leg or anything like that. And so this is how I serve it, okay? Basically just cut it, just like if it were baked chicken. And get your little piece off and continue to cut it. And then what I'm gonna do after I do that is get my bowl. And then put my, I'm gonna get more chicken than this, okay? I just wanna try to show you guys how I would serve it. Put the piece of meat in there, get that out the way. Get my pot of soup. Let's get it into view. And just kind of go in there and get some soup going. See, as easy as that. And remember that little trick I showed you guys a while back with the black soup, with the chimole? Remember I showed you to use that spaghetti server thing or even this skimmer, so that way you could go pick up some of the stuff that's on the bottom. See, like that. Put it in your bowl so that you can get some, all right? And here's our neck. I love the neck too. Just go ahead and put it in there. So let me get this pot out the way. See, I always come up with some little trick, right? So basically, I'll be honest with you, Relleno is just like a high-class chimole to me. And I'm going to cut more chicken and put it in there. And of course, there's stuff that's inside the belly of the chicken. Stuff inside the belly of the chicken. And what I'm going to do is just put some soup around in this pan, just so I could take a beautiful picture of this. But this pretty much is our finished product. We're going to serve this with some heated corn tortilla. They're not going to be fried, okay? They're just going to be soft corn tortilla, and this is how we serve it. But I want to go ahead, let me go ahead and take my bowl, my serving that I was making, and just kind of pour it in there to just make it look lovely. Isn't that pretty? I'm going to take a thumbnail like that, and then I'm going to go ahead and serve myself again. But this is our finished product, you guys. Okay, see? Just like I told you guys. Relleno is, to me, is like an upscale form of chimole, or what some people know as black soup. The only difference is that you cook the chicken whole and you stuff the ground beef and the egg inside. Now, I kind of like the difference between this and the way I do my chimole, because with the chimole, I leave the eggs whole, right? But with this, I kind of diced it and blended it really well with the ground beef and stuffed it on the inside. That had a really, really nice texture to it after we opened it up from the bird. Now, in my book, I didn't put in the method that you're supposed to sew the chicken shut, because honestly, I only made this dish like a couple of times when I was test trying it for the book. And I did notice that some of the stuff would follow, but enough of it didn't follow for me to be like annoyed with it. But for this time around, I really enjoyed sewing that chicken shut and sealing everything inside and making it steam like in its own juices and stuff. And the remainder that we had from the ground beef, we just kind of put it in the soup to give it some body, and it was actually awesome. Now, you can serve this with corn tortilla. This is how it's normally served. But to tell you the truth, I don't eat it with anything because I really love a lot of meat. And so basically, I just eat it alone. Just, you know, with the ground beef, the egg, and the chicken. I hope that this is one of them that you were waiting for, because some of the dishes that I'm doing now from the book are the stuff that I don't normally make on a regular basis. So I kind of save those for last, right? So I think I still have to do like the cassava pudding or the cassava cake or plastic pudding, however we know it by. I still have to do that one for you guys, okay? But for right now, this is the Relleno. And I apologize for the spelling in my book. It's not a typo or anything like that. I really spelled the name of this dish the way I heard it. And I didn't realize it had a Spanish spelling to it. So I'm going to correct that when I put up the title, okay? But in any case, in the book, it's R-I-E-N-O, and it's supposed to be like R-E-L-L-E-N-O. So don't worry about it. Just because I wrote the book, don't make me an expert, all right? And also, just because I'm showing you these recipes, don't mean that that's the only way you're supposed to make these recipes. You guys try them, you know, take them for a run. I met somebody at my dad's store the other day that told me that in the bread pudding, she cut up a little bit of peaches and put it inside the bread pudding, and it's actually awesome. I'm gonna try that soon one of these days. I like different diversions and stuff that we could do with the food to make it different and unique. So, thank you guys as usual for watching. Thank you so much too for all the people who've been going to my dad's website and the store to pick up their groceries. Bluefield-prod.com. I'll put a graphic up here so you guys can see. And you guys can always call him to find out, you know, his hours. I think it's 10 to 2, Monday through Saturday that they're open. And I want to also mention that my dad does freight from California to Belize. You know, he's actually like the #1 freight person in California, and he does the freight. So when you guys call, ask, you know, what all do you do? Because you'd be surprised at what all that he does. But anyways, thank you so much for watching, for subscribing, for liking, for buying the book, for sharing the show, and for just your awesome support. Until I see you guys again, take care.